Hi friends, so back again. So first thing I want to say is my return has been, it's been wonderfully received. Right, I'm recording this immediately in the after, well, not in the immediate after. It's 3 o'clock now. My video with my return has just gone up live a few hours ago, but even nonetheless, I've got quite a few subscribers. I'm assuming that by the time this goes up, I'll have had over 1,000 views for the first time. It'll be on a live. it like it's been a super positive reception, which I wasn't quite expecting. I thought it was going to be a bit more muted, and some the people who liked me would come back, but it appears a lot of you like me, and a lot of people have liked me enough to come back. The other thing I find amusing is that it seems that a lot of my traffic comes from being like recommended. So I don't know how much of that is you've already clicked on a video and it recommends my other stuff underneath, but nonetheless, I find it funny how a lot of it ends up being recommended, and such a narcissistic channel is recommended constantly. Like all of my stuff is. Like, the channel name is the MJ Show. The round table is called MJ's Round Table. The photo is one of me. The head is the one thing which doesn't have me plastered all over it, but even then it's got Mbappe one side, Ronaldo on the other, and it's got MJ in the middle. Right? Like, the entire thing is incredibly, like, self-centered. Even my thumbnail, I bit Michael Jordan's I Am Back letter from '95 and just changed my name with a few words around it. It's brilliant. And it still recommends me all the time. And you lot apparently like me enough to come back and watch me, so it's brilliant. So yeah, thanks for that. Like, rate, subscribe. It helps a ton because this goes on Spotify as well. So if you're listening on here, so you're listening on Spotify, thanks. Like, rate, subscribe. It helps a ton. And YouTube, obviously, you guys do it on anyway. Drop comments either in the comments section or in the live chat. I pretty much always set these to premiere. So the live chat always going off. Like Anish is always doing some sort of trolling stuff in the comments. JS mentioned about doing a Neymar video. I actually saw that while I was writing the structure for this episode out. So yeah, it's super, super appreciated. So yeah, we'll go straight into the video this time. So, well, from here, I know this is about 2 minutes of preamble before. But what I want to talk about today, and this is a different area to what I normally cover here. Normally I cover concepts. Today I want to cover a player because I don't necessarily do that as much on here. And I need to bring it over from TikTok, so the Q&A side's come over. Now I do want to integrate player deep dives. Depending on how well this does, I'll do more, and I might do player comparison videos too. There won't be any film or tape analysis because I'm too lazy to edit, and I can't be bothered to find someone to pay to do it as well. So basically, yeah, you're just going to have to deal with my ability to paint pictures with my mouth. So this video, in the first player deep dive, is going to be about Neymar. So the reason for this and why it popped up is because there was a compilation of his going around on Wednesday. And it was the Real Madrid game. So they played at the Bernabeu. They lost 3-1. Obviously, a lot of you know, they lost 2-0 at home as well. So they lost 5-1 overall. But obviously, Neymar was only there for the first leg because he broke his foot. Either that weekend or the following one. Yeah, it can only be one of those because the international breaks follows the second round of the knockout stages. And I don't know if they were the first or second wave of ties, if you will. So, yeah, I wanted to cover it because of that, and I thought I'd do a full career deep dive on Neymar. And I thought it would work because of the fact that his career is functionally over. Like, he's going to play the World Cup next year, and then he'll probably call it a day from there. So I think it just works in terms of the timeline. So, the reason why it irritated me so much is because of the fact that it was called a playmaking masterclass. That term, masterclass, is thrown around far too easily nowadays, regardless. But to call that game specifically a playmaking masterclass, when in the moment, no one called it that. That was not an allowable opinion. The common discourse going to your place of occupation the next day, whether it was work, whether it was school, was that, yeah, Neymar stank last night. He wasn't very good. And the fact that people are trying to do revisionist history on that annoys me. And it's been the case for a long time, actually. The first time I remember it popping up was in 22. When PSG and Madrid played each other in the knockout round. This is the same week, or like a week, so PSG played Real Madrid for the first time on the Tuesday, and like the week before, I want to say, this compilation started popping around. Like, not the same one, but that game. People started making comps of that game. And because of the fact that Neymar moves beautifully in it, and the fact that he glides across the surface of the earth, like his feet don't even look like they're touching the floor. People remember that game more fondly than it was in the moment. When in the moment, like I said, it wasn't an allowable opinion to say Neymar played well last night. It was Neymar was extremely disappointing last night. So was the rest of PSG. Right? They got their goal, and from there on, they were just super disappointing. Right? So I tweeted out that there's insane revisionism on this, and I was glad that, because that was the first time that I had actually remembered seeing some tweets where people were actually being honest about that game, because Neymar wasn't good that game whatsoever. He was one of the worst players on the pitch. PSG in a 50-50 possession game, Neymar had the second most touches of the team by a lot, and the player with the first most touches was a right back. And Dani Alves was often the guy who would start off the attacks for PSG. So for Neymar to dominate that much of the ball, so 86 touches in a 50-50 game, if they had 65, he'd have easily cleared 100% in that game. And let's say, for the sake of argument, Madrid score early in that game, or even it's just a 0-0 game for a long time. Yeah, no, forget that. Let's just say Madrid score early in that game and they pen him deep, right? Neymar's probably going to clear 120 touches that game, which is insane. For a game that big and that size, and for a team with the amount of weapons that PSG team had, for Neymar to dominate the ball that much is an absurdity. And for him to generate that little overall creation for PSG, for that to be called a playmaker masterclass, irritated me a lot. I tweeted about it, and several Neymar fans got upset about that. I hadn't spent that much time on Twitter in an argument session, just with various different people in a long time. I guess my Wednesday was pretty free, which is why I did that, but nonetheless, it was still super irritating. And the reason that it's irritating, and the reason why a lot of Neymar stuff irritates me, is because there's never a fair medium on him. So are there people who severely underrate him, the achievement merchants, if you will? Yes, absolutely. But at the same time, his fans, they overcorrect it far too much. They want you to believe, they want us, the audience, to believe that we were watching, his career is functionally over right now, which is why I can do like a full career autopsy, if you will. They want us to believe that what we saw in Neymar, the only player who clearly eclipsed that was Messi. They want you to believe, and sometimes some of them will have humility and admit that Maradona was above as well. They generally don't talk about anything pre-80, but still. They want you to believe that Neymar was definitively better than Zidane and Ronaldinho and Brazilian Ronaldo and Thierry Henry and Cristiano Ronaldo and so many other all-time greats that it's absolutely laughable to even have him in this conversation. And he should be on tiers above, right? Now, do I agree that Neymar is better than some of those names which I just mentioned? Yes. But acting as if it's absolutely clear is where it irritates me. And it's not just that. It's the fact that they say all these things about Neymar and then they hold him to zero standards. Because ultimately, what do all those guys who I just mentioned have in common? With the exception of Thierry Henry. They all won one of the biggest trophies in the world as the absolute clear-cut best player. Whether it was Ronaldinho with a Champions League, whether it was Brazilian Ronaldo with a World Cup, whether it was Zidane with a World Cup and a European Championship, and Brazilian Ronaldo won Copa Americas too. Who else did I mention? Cristiano, whether it was him winning multiple Champions Leagues as the clear-cut best player. There are so many other examples which I could pull, and they just hold him to zero of the standards. And they say, oh, winning is a team thing. But then they give all the credit for Neymar's teams making it that far to him. Okay, fine. But at the same time, he also had elite help next to him. He had Mbappe, who for that final run was a top 4 player in the world that season. And even at Barcelona, at sometimes he was the best player. Suarez was the best striker in the world. Suarez was also a top 3-5 player in the world. That's even ignoring Messi, right? Because obviously Messi was missing several stretches of that. Or even at PSG with Cavani. Cavani had a season or two where he was one of the absolute 1 or 2 best strikers in the world himself. And the second one of those in 17-18, where Benzema couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and the only other contender really was Kane and Cavani. No, Kane and Firmino. Cavani had a very legitimate argument, and I think I had it between him and Firmino as the number 1 striker for that season. Kane was probably 3rd or 4th. Suarez was a bit washed up by then. So for people to pretend that Neymar had no hope is disingenuous, and then you also factor in that they hold him to zero standards in terms of his bad performances. They also hold him to zero standards in terms of actually finishing off the actual moves which he generated, and that like he had zero flaws as a player. They continuously never acknowledge his flaws and his shortcomings as an individual. Whether it's the over-dribbling, whether it's the lack of being a consistent finisher, whether it's his lack of releasing the ball on time. All of those things which factor in, and some of those make him a great player, and others extremely holding back. It extremely irritates me when we're talking about a guy like Neymar, and that's why sometimes I end up coming across as not his biggest fan. But I actually am. I go to bat for him over most people. So that's what made me want to make this an episode. If this goes down well, or you guys want me to do deep dives on other players, let me know in the comments or in the live chat, and I will look to making it happen. These just take a bit of a while. Like, these are the most sheets of paper I've had to fill out in terms of scrolling for a player, partially because I had to do quite a bit of career stuff and then as iterations of the player. But nonetheless, I enjoy this, but if you want more of these, let me know and I'll look to make them, because they are quite a bit of fun. It's just that they will take a while. I've not even got to the end of page 1 and we're already at 11 minutes. So, yeah, and like I said, it's not the normal direction, but I think it's got a place on this channel now, especially that the TikTok stuff's gone. And like I said, his career's functionally over. He's going to retire next year, and if he doesn't, I'd be absolutely stunned. So, first of all, I think with Neymar we have to set the scene, right? So we have to cover his time pre-coming to Europe, so his time in Brazil. And that was absolutely a wild success, and that is ultimately why Neymar was the prince that was promised, essentially. He was the guy who was meant to become king and overtake Cristiano and overtake Messi. Such was that Pele said, before Neymar came to Europe, that, because obviously by this point Messi and Ronaldo were both firmly in all-time great conversations, especially Messi. And the thing that Pele said was, forget me, Messi has to become better than Neymar. Which, okay, was he right? Obviously not. But the point is that such was the degree of hype that Neymar had, that you have Brazil's greatest ever player, at that point probably the consensus football greatest ever, him or Maradona at this point in time, saying that Messi's not better than him. Messi can't be better than me first. He has to be better than Neymar first. Which shows the level of talent and absolute wizardry that Neymar had clearly already displayed in Brazil. You know, ultimately he won the Champions League equivalent over there. Santos hadn't won it for almost 50 years. And the time before they won it was in 63 with Pele, when they were back-to-back. They won 62 and 63. He also helped them to their first Brazilian Cup in 2010, albeit that tournament had only existed by that point since 1989, but Santos had yet to win one. Neymar comes in and they win it. That was formed post Pele, so can't really hold it against Pele because he was 50 when that tournament was made, but nonetheless. He also got a series of individual awards. He was a top 10 finish in the Ballon d'Or whilst in Brazil, and again, go back to episode 7 or 8, I think it was, maybe something around that. I hate the Ballon d'Or, but ultimately, if you're going to finish that high and you're playing in Brazil, that's an achievement in itself. I think it's something which you absolutely need to factor in. Because European standards for this award versus South American standards for the award are extremely different. So he was already dubbed the next Pele, and there was a huge battle for his signature, right? And even when that signature was won by Barcelona in 2013, that was at the end of a 5-16 battle. You had Chelsea, you had Manchester City as two teams from England, you had Bayern Munich, you had PSG, and then you also had Real Madrid, and Barcelona was the 6th team, and Barcelona ultimately won out. Cruyff even said that when Neymar came to Barcelona, Barcelona's board should seriously consider as to whether or not you're going to keep Messi. Because these two guys are similar in terms of how they operate. You can only keep one. You just signed Neymar. You probably have to sell Messi at some point or another. Which they ultimately turned out to be right in terms of the fact that long term they couldn't both play together. But they had 4 fun years together, even if they both weren't optimized. So ultimately, that's the opinion of Neymar in Brazil and him coming to Europe. It was an extremely high opinion that he was revered as, and ultimately it was probably deserved because of what he ended up doing over there. He was viewed as the next king. Pele's name was Ore. That was horrible pronunciation, I'm aware, but just roll with it. And Neymar was viewed as the next one. And it was also perfectly for him, especially considering everything he did in Brazil. He even led Brazil to the Olympic final, which is something that he hadn't won before, so Brazil actually took that quite seriously. And obviously he eventually won it in 2016, which was a huge thing for him. And even the following summer, before he comes in and lands in Barcelona, he rips off the Confederations Cup. Now, again, that's not a perfect tournament, as it no longer exists, so I don't think that's a great barometer for it. But ultimately, Brazil did beat Mexico, they beat Italy, they beat Uruguay, I think they might have beat Japan as well. They beat Spain. Neymar scored in 4 of these 5 games on the way to winning the tournament. He scored 4 goals, 5 games, he was the best player in that tournament. And again, Were these teams taking it seriously? Probably at least somewhat, because it's only a 2-week tournament, probably. So, maybe a week and a half, probably. Yeah. So a week for the group stages, then a week for the semi-final and the knockout, and semi-final and the final, right? Neymar scored in all of those games apart from the Uruguay one. He was brilliant. And so that further strengthened the case of, wow, Neymar is going to be an absolute superstar. He's going to take over the entire world. And that was essentially his enunciation to the footballing world, to the casual world at large. So then obviously him coming to Europe. Who competed for his signature? So there's 6 teams that I mentioned. So out of those teams, there's 2 teams which fit better than others in terms of both development and him as a player. Barcelona is probably the worst of those. So I'm not gonna rank them one by one because that's a bit of a dull exercise. What I am going to talk about is the 2 teams which fit the most: Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. Barcelona, absolutely not. So the reason why Barcelona didn't fit is because they already have Messi. Right, that's a fairly self-explanatory position. Neymar's the next star. They're not actually that far apart in age. Neymar's only 5 years younger than Messi. Less than full 5 years because Neymar's February 92 and Messi's June 87. So, bit of redundancy. By the time Messi gets washed up at assuming we followed normal age lines and Messi would have been finished at 32, 33, Neymar would have been 26, 27, 28. So is that ideal? No. So Barcelona probably just wanted him, A, because of the Brazilian heritage, they just wanted to stack the deck. Apparently part of Neymar's decision for wanting to go there was to do with Ronaldinho and Rivaldo as well. So, why were Bayern arguably the best fit? So they had a gap in the market at the 10. You have Ribery, you have Robben, and then your striker in 13-14. Lewandowski didn't go there until 14-15. Yes, because Götze signed at the start of 13-14. Lewandowski moves at the start of the next season, I want to say, because that was the season they had those ugly, stripy Barcelona B kits, essentially. So, Neymar goes... No, so they had a gap in the market at the number 10 position, because I'm assuming that Thomas Muller was the number 10 then. He was the guy who they often played with. They had Mandzukic and Gomez as their front men. And you have the 2 wide men. So there's a clear gap in the market there for Neymar to step into. Guardiola's going there. Guardiola wanted Neymar. He rang him. He said that this will be a wonderful place for you to develop. And it actually would have been, because of the fact that some of the bad habits that Neymar developed with the over-dribbling and some of the things which he ended up not being able to shake, such as the stuff where he would often drop too deep into midfield and things like that, that probably would have been negated because of the fact that Guardiola's first and second phase stuff is up there with any coach ever and is probably the best in the world. Probably the best ever, at least in the last 30 years. So he would have stripped all the fat and just made Neymar a final third conductor, which would have made him his most ruthless, efficient best. So the other team was a wonderful fit, was the team on the other side of Spain, Real Madrid. Real Madrid had a wonderful fit, and they were also looking to add another superstar. So, in 12-13, their setup was the 4-2-3-1. Their front three was Di Maria, Ozil, Ronaldo, Benzema. Such Higuain, like one of those two. Di Maria off the right, Ronaldo off the left, Ozil behind the striker. So, Real Madrid were looking to get rid of Ozil anyway, because they were looking to add Gareth Bale. If Neymar doesn't sign with Barcelona and he chooses to go with Real Madrid likely never signed Gareth Bale. Di Maria stays off the right and they likely just sell Ozil. As opposed to Di Maria tucking inside and becoming a central midfielder. And then your midfield probably just stays Alonso, Modric. You have Neymar as the 10, and then you have Di Maria, Ronaldo, and then Benzema. Probably Benzema ends up being the guy, because you don't necessarily need... Yeah, because he fits better. Benzema can drop out, Ronaldo drives in. Neymar can combine with those three, and Di Maria stays as sort of the isolation artist who sort of balancer, who sort of plugs the gaps on the right-hand side. Those two are fine. Cristiano and Neymar are natural fits together, especially Cristiano post-13-14, because his knee likely would have still given way and he still has to go to a more poach-type role. And ultimately, when that happens, he ends up being... Neymar gets the full keys to the side and he naturally ends up sort of ushering CR7 less out of the limelight in terms of a footballing sense. As a star, Cristiano's still better looking. Cristiano still scores all the goals. He still has the more aura, more swaggerish celebrations and things like that. Ronaldo still remains the face of the team. But the keys to the footballing side would have been Neymar. And eventually, come like 2017, I'd say, that would have become apparent when Neymar truly grew into himself. And the flair and all the extras that come with being Neymar. So by the time that he's 25, he would be the true star of the team. What the hell is this? Dust. So eventually, he ends up going signing with Barca. So now let's go into his time at Barcelona. So year one, it was an awkward, clunky fit because you have Neymar, you have Messi, who's not in the best physical condition. He had quite a few hamstring injuries that season, and he also had some calf issues the year before, which ultimately ruled him out of the second leg against Bayern Munich. This bottle's great. It's glass. You should use these instead of plastic. So you had Messi and Neymar as the wingmen. Sometimes you'd even have Neymar as the right winger and you'd have Messi as the false nine. They'd always make up two of the front three, and then you either had Fabregas or Alexis Sanchez as one of the other two members of the front three. I shouldn't have to tell you why that's an awkward fit. You have three guys who are all ball to feet. Neymar hadn't yet been made to sacrifice for the team by Luis Enrique, and as a result, you get a very awkward, clunky fit where you have three ball to feet guys, right? Alexis doesn't know how to move off the ball. Cesc is a natural midfielder. He's an 8/10, and Alexis is a winger/central forward who comes to the ball, false nine type. Messi never played off the ball his entire career, and neither did Neymar. Added to the fact that you don't have a real authoritarian coach because you have, I want to say Tata Martino. I think it was him, because Enrique was the season after, Villanova was the year before. I might have just got the guy wrong in terms of who it was. I'm pretty sure it was Tata Martino. My phone is over there and I can't be bothered to get up. And I don't think you don't want to look at an empty chair. So yeah, we're going to go with that. And then that's really awkward, right? So Alexis goes, in comes Luis Suarez. Suarez, who at this point is the clear-cut best striker in the world, who had a serious case as the second best player in the world in the previous season because of what he was doing for Liverpool. At bare minimum, he was a top three player. It was Messi, Cristiano, and Suarez as the top three guys in the world, particularly at that point in time. So you go into that, Luis Enrique comes in and he says, right, Messi, Suarez, you play football. Neymar, you're a tricky one-on-one guy. You rinse guys one-on-one and you're going to run in behind and you're going to feed off the gravity of the son, that is Lionel Messi, who is going to be our primary scorer and dribbler and creator. So Neymar just goes score goals. And he scored a bunch of goals. He scored borderline 40 goals. He got 10 assists. He scored in every game from the quarterfinals onwards. He scored in both legs of the quarters against PSG, the City in the last 16. Both legs of the semis against Bayern Munich. And then he scored this clinching goal against Juventus in the final, which was wonderful. So that's viewed as his definitive Champions League run as the second fiddle, which, there's maybe something in that. Year 3, so Messi had a stretch of about, I want to say it was 2 months out, because I think he missed 9 games. So that's pretty I think it was 9 La Liga games. So he got injured at the end of September. I think he came back at some point. Maybe it was only 6 weeks. He came back at some point in November, December, I want to say. Or was it 9 games total? Neymar had a bunch of goal involvements, and he was conducting the attacks, and he was super direct, and his combo play with Suarez was absolutely magical. This was buzzcut Neymar. Like, it was insane stuff to watch. That is some of the most magical stuff. That is some of the most magical football that we've seen from any individual player in a small stretch. Then he faltered late. Messi comes back. He's sort of stuck between roles, and ultimately you end up in a really difficult position where Barcelona end up losing in the quarterfinals to Atletico Madrid when they really, really, really should have gone back-to-back in the Champions League that year. 16-17, so year 4, his final year with Barcelona. He gets given the keys to the creative side of things. So Dani Alves leaves. He goes off to Juventus for a season. Then he goes to PSG and he rejoins Neymar. So then they end up going to a back 3. So you have a back 3 and then you have wing backs. Neymar ends up playing left wing back for large stretches of that season. I say left wing back. It was left midfielder in a 3-5-2, but essentially a wing back, which is obviously far from what he should be doing. But he has all the keys offensively. He is the guy who's creating, he's the guy who's conducting the attacks. He had a 2020 year. His finishing was awful. Barcelona fans were seriously angry with him. But at this point, I think this was the first season where he had a legitimate case as the number 1 player in the world. And you could clearly see that, okay, if he gets his own side, he can seriously, in the mainstream opinion, challenge Messi for the throne. I think towards the end of that season, he had a serious case as number 1. I actually might have given it to him. On TikTok, I said several times, I think Neymar was the best in the world that season. It's something which I've grappled with going back and forth. Messi was ridiculously efficient in front of goal. I think he scored 37 goals just in La Liga that season. I think he only played about 33 games or something. Finishing was insane. His assist numbers were pretty good, but he wasn't in charge of the progression or the creation, same way that Neymar was. So for that reason, I had no problem if someone said Neymar's better. And like I said, for a long time have gone back and forth over that. Then 200 million comes in. PSG, they say, okay, come, we'll give you 200. We're going to pay 200 million to get you out of here. We'll give you insane money. Barcelona, give him to us. Barcelona tried to reason with him. He actually signed an extension in the previous year. He almost went there in 2016 before Messi stepped in. Messi almost left in 2016 himself, by the way. I'm pretty sure it was Man City. It was the first season Pep went there, obviously. And so from there, he signs with PSG, which looked for a rather embarrassing moment for Piqué because he stays post, and then he ends up leaving. So he goes off, and then so year one he had a glorious stretch, right? His form was ridiculous. He was knotting up goals and assists for absolute joke. His displays in Ligue 1 were absolutely ridiculous, right? He had a serious case. I think he was the best in the world at this point, and I was comfortable in saying that. Same with 18-19. But year one, he still had some issues in terms of over-dribbling, not releasing the ball on time, head was down a bit too much, playing a bit too much hero ball, trying to do everything himself when he should have implemented his teammates more. 18-19, breaks his foot, so he loses some of the explosion and the dynamism he has. But ultimately, I think it worked out for the best. Thomas Tuchel moves in, he strips a lot of the fat from Neymar's game, he moves him centrally, turns him into a pure number 10, and that stretch because he took a bit of time to get into the season, from late September, early October, up until he breaks his foot again, which really annoys me. I'll never get over that, because I went to the first leg of PSG United, and I was in the United end. Me, my friends, my family, everyone knew why I was there. I was there to watch PSG. I was there to watch Neymar. I was there to watch Mbappe. Verratti was the best man on the pitch then. I dog-walked Paul Pogba. He's showing what a proper midfielder was. Taught him a lesson. Saw Mbappe score. I was excited to see Cavani as well. He pulled his hamstring the Friday before. And obviously Neymar breaks his foot, and I was really annoyed. I saw early reports that, oh no, it's just like a really bad bruise. He could just be out for 3 weeks. 4 days later, nah, he's out for 2-3 months. He didn't come back until like the end of April. So he would have even missed the quarterfinals if PSG didn't screw up against United in the return leg. Tettle boy. I had to face several lectures and disgruntled people who were annoyed at my Mbappe fandom the following day in school. It was not fun. So, yeah, that was the peak version of Neymar. Year 3 is probably his best year. No, year 3 was his best year as a collective. They won all 3 domestic trophies available to them. He was crucial in both of the finals, and obviously in Ligue 1, he was their best player. And then I think Mbappe won the Player of the Year, though. No, did they give it? No, I don't think they did, because the season was cut short. They only gave the Golden Boot, I want to say. So, but nonetheless, he was a huge part. He was probably, like, him and Mbappe, that at this point is the first time it was a legitimate debate between him and Mbappe. And then from 18-19, Mbappe won Player of the Year, but he wasn't better than Neymar. But 19-20, there was a serious case. And then gets to the final, he's the best player, Atalanta especially, even though they were struggling before Mbappe came on to really carve them open. And he has his lowest amount of goals for a long time, actually, to that point. Since his first year in Europe, because I want to say it was only 19 goals that season. So, as an individual, he was worse on the numbers side. His understanding of the game, though, had reached a much higher level, though. His knowledge of when to release, timing, when to get rid of the ball, when not to over-dribble, when to pass, when to shoot, when to get other guys involved was absolutely wonderful. That is one of the best performances. That's, in terms of pure footballing excellence and technique and putting everything together, that's probably his peak season. In terms of as an actual player, I've always preferred 18-19, because he still has the goal threat and the dynamism of 17-18 at like 90%. But he also had ridiculous levels of football understanding. So that's why 18-19 is my favourite. Year 4, 2021, worst yet as a collective and as an individual to that point. His goal scoring fell off a cliff after Tuchel left and Pochettino came in. He took on much more load from a midfield standpoint. And he delivered some jaw-dropping performances in terms of general play, but his finishing was awful. The best game that sums this up is 2021 Bayern Munich home. So they win the away game. Mbappe was ruthless, Neymar was the artist. Like that second assist, especially when he... Was it his second? The assist that he had for Marquinhos, where everyone's coming out, Marquinhos just chills on the last line, Neymar wraps it with his left foot, over the top, hits Marquinhos on the button, who finishes it, and there you have a wonderful assist. The home game captures that as well, but not with the same level of effectiveness because they weren't scoring. They didn't create a bunch of chances. Neymar missed a ton of chances that game. He blazed ones wide. He hit the post when he shouldn't have. He ended up... the one that he got unlucky with is where he chopped it inside, takes another shift, and he crashes it off the bar. That was super unlucky. But outside of that, he had some really, really poor finishing moments in that game. And that almost cost PSG, because if Bayern Munich even had Lewandowski in that game, then they win that. Year 5, he was atrocious. He was absolutely awful. Post-Copa America, he comes back overweight, he comes back really, really fat. And he was out of shape, rolls his ankle, completely rips it up. He comes back, and he closed the season well, but there was nothing to play for anymore. 21, 22, 23, year 6, he starts off like a house on fire. He was absolutely brilliant. This was probably his peak passing form. He's totally conducting the attack. He's the one who's moving guys, shifting guys from place to place. He's the guy who's organising everything. Dinking balls over the top to Messi, dinking balls over the top to Neymar, initiating all the combination play. He was absolutely fantastic. This is his best version as a playmaker passer. Dribbling, the threat's largely gone. He sort of rediscovered it towards the end of November, but not the end of November, come November, just before the World Cup. But ultimately, he didn't have the same level of goal threat. His finishing was just ridiculously efficient that season. So, yeah. And then he left. And then that was functionally his club career over. Because I don't think he's even played, before he went back to Brazil, I don't think he played a proper string of games for 2 years. And then you go to Brazil, in terms of his international career. So, he was left out of the 2010 World Cup. That was a hugely controversial decision, which the coach really shouldn't have done, because he could have given them some extra dynamism when they lost to the Dutch. And that could have been his Brazilian Ronaldo World Cup moment in 94, where he wins as a bit part player, where he would have played more than Ronaldo because Ronaldo didn't play. But that could have been a wonderful moment for him. By the end of the tournament, he probably actually might have been the starting left winger, depending on Robinho. But he left out Ronaldinho and Neymar, which was a big mistake. So there was that. 2011, he was okay. He scored a few goals. I can't say I've really gone back and watched that tournament. I just know that he scored a couple of goals here and there. 2013 Confed Cup, I've already gone over that. 2014, his World Cup. He didn't have a game which really stood out as a bad one, right? He was good in all 3 group games, even though they did go 0-0 in one of them. His best game was probably against Croatia, the opening game of the tournament. He scored, and he was the primary reason that they ended up winning 3-1. I was rooting for Croatia that game. I wanted there to be some contrarian stuff going on as a child. And then he was okay against Chile, a bit anonymous. And then he was pretty good against Colombia before he got his back blown out by Zuniga. And then 2015, he was suspended for the second game, which was super disappointing. So he never made it back because Brazil didn't play again before he was eligible. 2016, got to the Olympics and they won, which was a big thing because ultimately Brazil had never won the Olympics before, so they were extremely satisfied that he won in that. He scores the winning penalty, breaks down in tears. Lovely moment for him. To that point, that's probably... I'm not sure it'd be his career high moment, but I think it's certainly up there for him, just based on his reaction and the way that Brazil ended up. Brazil as a nation seemed to react to that. 2018, the World Cup. Now, this one and his following tournament seem to be the most debated. 2018, Neymar was not good in the World Cup. I'm sorry, he just wasn't. I remember that tournament. I watched those games. He wasn't good, right? He was over dribbling. The ball was sticking. He was not moving the ball on time. He was stymieing the movement. He wasn't efficient in his decision making whatsoever. You are the primary creator for the prestige footballing nation in the world. This is your prime tournament. You're 26. There is no excuses here, and you are bad. It was a really disappointing tournament. So, yeah, that might seem harsh, but it absolutely isn't. Go back and watch the games, he wasn't good. Swiss, he was okay, right? He was nothing special whatsoever. Those group stages were dominated by Cristiano, for good reason, by the way. He was absolutely fantastic. And, Neymar is funny, because all 3 of them, the big 3 going into the tournament, Messi, Cristiano, and Neymar, Cristiano, he scores his free kick to tie it up. Messi blazed it over. Neymar had his free kick. It was just a weak, feeble cross into the box. And it wasn't exactly a shooting range, but come up with a moment of magic, man. This is your tournament. You were the best player in the world for the first part of the season. And you come up with that. Costa Rica. He was okay. I think he was just really average, and then he scored at the end to seal it, and he broke down in tears. That's another thing with Neymar. He doesn't seem mentally stable. He's always crying. Like he always seems liable to just break down in tears. It's just like, come on, man. Like, you're their best player. What kind of, what is this? And then Serbia. This was very good. This was his best game of the tournament. He was creating. The ball wasn't sticking as much. He was actually very impressive this game. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that showing. He crossed the ball in for Thiago Silva. He was good. Mexico, he was okay. He scored, but nothing to write home about. That was just a simple routine game. And then Belgium, again, he was average. He was nothing exceptional whatsoever. He didn't create a ton of chances. He wasn't someone who was dominating the play. Again, like he had that moment at the end where Courtois came up with a fantastic save, which would have sent Brazil into extra time. But nonetheless, that wasn't a wow tournament by any means. Held the ball too much, too long, stymied the flow. In general, just a super disappointing tournament from a guy who he looked as if he was going to take the throne. Like, that was meant to be his moment. He was meant to win the World Cup. He was meant to win the Ballon d'Or. He was meant to cement his place among Brazilian and football greats. And he didn't. Injury, whatever. He didn't. Unfortunately, people don't remember those things. I remember it, so I don't knock him on the head too much for it. But ultimately, I also don't know how people pretend he was good that tournament, because that's just insulting your intelligence. 2021. I thought he was the best player in the tournament. I thought he was better than Messi. I thought that tournament he was absolutely exceptional. He lacked some goals. He could have certainly scored more. But ultimately, his general play, his conduction of the Brazilian attack, what he was doing game to game was so good that I think he was the best player in that tournament. Except the final. Now, the reason why I still call him the best and not Messi, because Messi stunk even worse in that final. Okay, Neymar wasn't awful. Neymar just was, not very good, right? He was holding the ball too much. You'll notice a very common criticism here. Not moving the ball enough. He was too slow to shift it on. Holds it on a far too regular basis. Just generally not playing as a pure 10 should. Whether it's trust of teammates, whatever it is, he just wasn't making the right decisions on a properly regular basis. Messi on the other hand stunk that game, which is why I'm fine saying that Neymar was still the best player in that tournament, even if he didn't have a very good final. At all, by the way. Regardless of what the Argentinian players say about how hard he was to deal with. In 22, he was awful. Right, in the World Cup, he was awful against Serbia. And, funnily enough, the entire reason that he got injured that game, it wasn't because of some dirty tackle, he held the ball too long. I was saying to myself, right, move the ball about 3 or 4 seconds before he finally moved the ball. He rolls his ankle, and now he's done. He has to miss a few games, and now he's not the same. South Korea. He was average, really just average. And that's not a game you can take seriously anymore. Brazil were up 4-0 in the first half or something. 4-0, 4-1. It was just a super easy routine game, so I can't exactly hold you to high thing for that. If Brazil won that game 1-0, that'd be a disappointment. Forget actually losing it. And then against Croatia. Dreadful. Honestly. That's the other game that people revise a lot. He was dreadful that game. He was absolutely awful. He had one moment that game. And it was a wonderful moment. The 1-2s, taking it round the goalkeeper, smashing it through for net. And I was rooting for Neymar that game. It's the day before that I went to Greece the day after. Some idiot said "Daddy's money" when I recorded a video on the balcony from the apartment we were in. Some idiot said that. That's why I found that really funny. But yeah, so Neymar against Croatia was not remotely good, right? He was awful. Again, holding the ball. When he did move the ball on time, he wasn't moving it quickly enough. And because of the fact that his ankle was bad, there was even less reason to hold onto the ball for so long. It was such a disappointing performance outside of the goal when he got his signature moment. I was ready to brag because my uncle, who I was watching the game with, was cussing the living you-know-what out of him for the entire game. My cousin, who also doesn't like Neymar, was doing the same. He's only 7 years older than I am. He doesn't particularly rate Neymar. And it was just a general lambasting the entire game. And he scores, and I was like, okay, great, yeah, we're in the clear now. Yeah, we're good. And then, because I think, okay, we can wash all this away, we can brush it under the carpet. But no, they can't, because they end up conceding. Yeah, that's not Neymar's fault, obviously. He had a match-winning involvement. But nonetheless, if you do that throughout the rest of regulation, then you're in a very good spot. Then he was unavailable in 24 because of his ankle. So that's the 40 minutes of precursor that you have to him as an individual. No, in terms of his career. But what he had before his career was finished. It'll be funny, because obviously, what's the date today? July 12th. It'll probably be this weekend. It'll either be this weekend or next weekend. Next year. So actually, no, by the time you see this probably will be the weekend that the World Cup final will be played next year in Jersey. And if Neymar wins the World Cup, I'll have to come back to this and call myself a loon. That's not going to happen. Like, I would be so stunned if that happened. Like it would be one of the biggest shocks that I could possibly think of happening. But yeah, so that's his career to this point. So now I want to talk of him as the player, right? So in 14-15, he was an outlet. He was functioning off of the other guys. 15-16, and again, I know I've sort of hashed this, but let's just do it briefly here again. Again, blend of athleticism, similar, and he was just a fantastic player who functioned off of others. 15-16, blend of athleticism, creation, and scoring. 16-17. Too much dribbling, but was great, had the keys to the attack, and there wasn't a great midfield there because Iniesta was a lot older at this point, Xavi was gone. They were looking to try and deal with Busquets and Rakitic. It wasn't ideal. 17-18, he was the best, but still stopped slow the attack sometimes. Head was still down, it was a bit disappointing. 18-19 was his peak. 19-20, still had it all together up here, but didn't have the athleticism anymore. 20-21, similar to the year before, but didn't have the athleticism or the same goal threat. Then 21-22, he was awful. 22-23, peaked as a passer, but almost in terms of scoring efficiency, but didn't have the same goal threat anymore because of the fact he couldn't move as well. So, if we talk about Neymar now, the individual, right? So if we look at him as an individual, I don't need a sheet for this. I deliberately make it. I had 9 pages for this, by the way, and I don't even need them for some of it. Like for this specific section, I'm not even going to need it really. So if we look at Neymar the player, right? So specifically let's use 16-17 through to 2021. Actually, no, forget that. We'll scratch off the final year of Barcelona, even though I do think that's a serious year that you can call him the best player in the world. I think he had 4 seasons where you can legitimately call him the best player in the world. So 16-17 in his first 3 years in Paris. Especially those first 3 years. I think that last year in Barcelona the case is a bit weaker, but it's still strong enough to the point where you can make the case and you are not a absolute loony, right? So let's just look at the PSG. Let's just look at the PSG stage. So 17-18, right? No, let's break this down for his skill set, right? So, and we'll do a skill set and his physique and him as a physical specimen. Yeah, we'll go with the physical specimen first. You can see this is the less structured part now. So, physically, he's wonderful. He rides challenges almost as well as anyone that I've ever seen. He is one of the most gifted players in terms of acceleration that I've ever seen. His zip across the first 5 yards is absolutely fantastic. You're not catching him when that little burst, especially when. So my favourite move he does is that he'll do the step over, he'll feint going past, so his right foot goes behind the back of the ball. He gets you moving, you're stuck in the mud, and then he'll shift the ball past you again. He did it very well he does it very well in general. The first time I really noticed it was really a pattern, was probably maybe the Toulouse home game. I don't know. I can't remember exactly. Maybe I'm missing one. I think it was the Toulouse home game. So his home debut with PSG, because he went past the guy after doing that little move. So he had the guy froze. He stood him up, step over maybe, drags his foot past the ball, fakes, guy stuck in the mud, zips it past him, and he does a no-look cross. This point, he was still somewhat of a winger. His top speed was very, very impressive. He could cover grass for joke. He would eat it up. And just in general, like, he was underratedly strong, right? He's not going to bounce anyone. Like, say, Ronaldinho's goal against Chelsea in 2005, where he mows over Ronaldinho and he blasts the ball into the corner. Not the corner, not in the middle of the goal, but he wrong-footed check. Yeah, it would have been check. That's not something Neymar was going to do, but he was strong enough to the point where you weren't going to necessarily bully him and ragdoll him around, right? And then, so that's him as a physical specimen, because he's quick, he's fast in terms of he's quick enough to go in behind. See, 14-15, his outlet play was very, very good. Teams were worried about going in behind. No, teams were worried about leaving space in behind because they knew that Messi could hit Neymar over the top. And then you also have him as a underrated strong specimen. And then the way that his body moves in general is just beautiful. And then you have the footballing stuff. Because this is the thing which people refuse to understand about Neymar. Neymar is also one of the most physically gifted players that we've seen. And then, so we have him as a technical player. So, as a dribbler, he's one of the best we've ever seen. One-on-one, he's a demon. In tight spaces, he's a demon. He is someone who can also dribble past 2-3 guys and with a wonderful change of direction because of the way that his agility is. And the way that his balance and he's beautifully coordinated and things like that. He's one of the most wonderful players that you will ever see in terms of doing all of those different types of things. He's just an absolute joy to watch. As a dribbler, as a finisher, he's not very consistent, right? So he's an inconsistent finisher. Like, he's very much a rhythm finisher. So the difference between a rhythm finisher and a natural finisher is, say, someone like Aguero, right? They can come in cold after a month out, and if you just give them the ball, even if they snatch quickly at it, they can still rifle it in the top corner, right? It's wonderful. A rhythm finisher is someone closer to Neymar, right? They're not someone who they almost have to locate the radar, right? Let's say that this is Neymar, this is the goal. Neymar needs to hone in, right? He's very liable to send it into Rosette because he doesn't hit it cleanly, or liable to drag it wide, or liable to, just place it really far wide of the spot that he's really trying to hit. And, that's fine. And then get him in the rhythm, get him in that zone where he's taking a lot of shots and getting him in a spot where he can naturally hone in as time goes on. Then you have a guy in Neymar who is not ruthless in front of goal, but is good enough to score a bunch of goals. And you trust him as a finisher. Whereas, say, at other points you won't necessarily. So he needs a bit of time to get back into rhythm as a scorer, which is fine. Different players have different rhythms that they play with, and that's not necessarily a problem. And then, as a passer, he is one of the best ever in terms of variance because he is left foot and right foot. Obviously, weak foot finisher is very good as well. Weak foot passer, he's very, very good. So he can make any pass with either foot. How many guys can do that, right? So say his assist for Marquinhos against Bayern. How many guys can play that pass on their weak foot? How many guys can do it? Honestly, like, if we were to really be honest, Maradona can't, Messi can't. Ronaldinho is maybe the only other person who would even try that, because he's just a weirdo, he's an alien, he saw things in a way that other people couldn't see them. That's the problem. That's maybe the only other guy that I've looked at extensively, right? Maybe Cherky would, because he seems to like to enjoy trying things. So those are the only guys which I can really see doing it. And then in terms of his ingenuity, right? So the other thing is, not only can he play any pass with either foot, he will try any pass with either foot. So like, say, if we were to look at, so there was a game they played against Red Star Belgrade, they won 6-1. He scored a hat-trick in that game. He scored 2 free kicks, and he scored a lovely move off of a lovely sweeping finish that he had. No, lovely finish off of a lovely sweeping move that he initiated. And got a little cutback from Mbappe, and he sent the other one into the roof of the net. That was wonderful. So what ended up happening in that game was, I think it was for Mbappe's goal, which I want to say was the 4th. It might have been the 5th, but I think it was the 4th. Neymar is stuck. He's squared up against the guy, but there's nowhere to move because there's a defender here, there's a defender there. He shifts the ball to his left, and he scoops the pass over with his left foot over the back of the defence because Benat's making a line-breaking run. He squares it, and Mbappe taps it in. Super simple. It's wonderful. It's just, like, not many players are going to try that pass on their weaker foot. They might try and at most they maybe try and Rabona it. They might try wrong foot it. But they're not going to scoop it over. So His ingenuity is up there with any player I've ever seen. His ability to make any pass with either foot is the best of any player that I've ever seen. So he's willing to try anything, and he's capable of doing anything, which is what makes me think that he's one of the best ever. So obviously there's a few areas of weaknesses. So his finishing, like I said already, isn't perfect, and his weight of pass isn't perfect either. So like the thing which has Messi for me as one of the absolute aliens, because he doesn't have a ton of ingenuity, right? He has some angle bias, but it's not as much as people really like to make out, but he has some. His weight of pass is perfect. If he hits you with a pass, it is generally easy to control. He will hit you in stride, and it is something which you can easily manage, and it makes your job so easy as the receiver. If I were to compare it, it is, and I'm not an NFL expert by any means, but it is like, say, one quarterback can hit you in the pocket, in the hands, every single time, and it's an easy catch, so I'm not going to use names and examples. And another guy, your passes can just be too hot to handle sometimes, and they're just hard. You know, they hit your fingertips because you're not easy enough to bring in. Basketball's probably the better example that I have. So, like, say, Magic is the king of hitting you in your pocket to go up with a pass immediately. But like, say, a guy like Westbrook. Actually, no, here's a better example, because these two guys are contemporaries. Westbrook and Harden. So Harden, his passes are always easier to catch. They're always easier to handle. So even though his variance is lower, he sees things less than Westbrook does. So Harden will make the pass extremely easy for you to catch, whether it's a bounce pass and it's coming you and hitting you at your hip, whether it's a lob pass and he's hitting you up high, he'll spray the pass. He has some pass bias, so like he can't go from right to left. So like he can't play this angle with the flick of the wrist, but he can go that way across his body. So left to right, he's very good at that pass. He'll hit you in your pocket and it's super easy to handle. But say Westbrook, he is not as good at that. His passes are sometimes too quick, sometimes they hit you in awkward spots, sometimes they're super quick, they're super fast and too hot to handle. Sometimes he'll hit you low with it, sometimes he'll hit you a bit too high, sometimes he won't hit you on time, sometimes he'll hit you with the pass and it's not in the right shooting pocket, or you have to relocate, just even that half step which lets the defender come out to you, or you have to move and take a bounce and you can't necessarily do it because that's not in your skill set, or just little things like that. But at the same time, Westbrook can see every pass. Like, he will try anything. He will see the pass, which is no coach will ever tell you to make it, even if they see it. Let's take Magic, right? Magic sees any pass. Even he will not try some of those passes that Westbrook does, and Westbrook sometimes pulls off, because they're just insane. Like, say, if we take Westbrook's bounce pass, which went like 40 feet and nutmegged the guy in his MVP season. I think it was the Raptors. I don't remember who. Maybe it was Patrick Patterson, but I don't remember the exact person who did it. He bounce passes it 40 feet, maybe longer, maybe 50 or 60 feet. He hits the guy and he hits it in stride and he dunks it. That is not the right pass to make. Why are you making that pass? That is very much a, what are you doing? Oh, okay, fair enough, it worked. That is the type of pass that is. Harden won't try that pass because it's improbable to make. So he'll never get that assist. But Westbrook will. So he'll have the higher highlight reel stuff, but Harden's is more dependable. He is the guy who'd rather run your offense because of the fact that his passes are easier to handle, is easier to catch, and the way that he tends to think is more like a point guard as well. But that last part is less relevant. But especially the passing part, Harden's stuff is easier to catch than Westbrook's is. So that's probably the best example I can think of. So again, who's the better one? Take your pick. Same thing with Messi and Neymar. Exact same conundrum, right? For example, let's take Messi's assist for the first goal against the Netherlands in the 22 World Cup. That pass, no one else is thinking of that route, and they're going to drill you in line, right? Guys will, why? Because getting the pass in that angle is hard, and hitting a guy in stride along the floor is a lot harder than doing the scoop, right? Most guys would try and scoop it if they saw it at all. Maradona probably dribbles it and then dumps it off a little bit later, right? Because the gap to cover for the scoop was a bit harder. Messi just drills it along the floor in stride. The guy makes a little move and he finishes it. What does Neymar do in that situation? Let's flip the angle. He's on the right side. Neymar probably tries to scoop it. And ultimately, while that will work probably a higher percentage of the time, in the same way that Westbrook's passes will... Actually, no. While that will find the guy a higher percentage of the time than, say, Messi's will, in the same way that Neymar's one will find the guy a higher percentage of the time than... No. While Neymar's pass will reach the guy a higher percentage of the time, then Messi's drill across the floor will, similar to how Westbrook's will find the guy a higher percentage of the time than Harden's will. Harden's one, when it reaches the guy, is less likely to lead to a difficult shot. Same thing with Messi. Because ultimately, what's harder? A ball that's along the floor, which you have to get out your feet and drill, or the ball that's coming out the sky, and you have to bring it down or you have to volley it. Right, so that's the difference. Right, so those are... that's a slight drawback in Neymar's creation as well, even with all the variety that comes with it. And then, sometimes he just goes down too easily. He rides challenges excellently, but with that, sometimes he also goes down, and he ends up staying down, and he holds the ball too long, so he rides the challenge for too long. Like, say, after the first bump and the second bump, he should get rid of it. Really after the first bump, really even before the guy gets there, he should get rid of it. He's going to the fourth bump, to the fifth bump, to the sixth bump, and then he gets fouled, and he's got kicked 4 times, and now he's on the floor, and now he's holding his foot heads, because he's just been kicked by a guy who weighs 85 kilos, probably more, and is 5'10", and now his foot really bloody hurts. But he never recognised that, and he continued to do it. So the 3 main flaws that I would say, so there are a few main flaws that really stick out with Neymar, along with all the detailed strengths that he has. His regular rhythm finish, so his need to be a rhythm finisher. So like say, we see weaknesses like that in 1920 and 2021. He's further away from the goal, so his zones aren't as dialed in, so he ends up with more wild finishes. His weight of pass can sometimes be off. Like sometimes it's just difficult to handle. Maybe it's high, maybe it's not sharp enough, maybe he underhits it, maybe he overhits it. You'd much rather overhit than he underhit, but nonetheless, he sometimes doesn't weight it perfectly as much as some of the best playmakers do. Like Maradona and Messi, they didn't overhit their passes as much as Neymar does. And they didn't underhit them either. Neymar, to be fair, none of these guys would underhit their passes. It's pretty much always the overhit. I'm just trying to cover every angle. Then the release of the ball. He just doesn't release it quickly enough. He's willing to eat the foul. Now, over there, that is like a sign of respect. Like, yeah, you can't foul me, safe. But ultimately, it stems the flow of the team. Because ultimately, when you foul a guy, what happens? They don't take quick free kicks every single time. And say if it's like 25, 30 yards from the box, let's say you're wide 30, 40 yards from the box, and they bring all their guys up. Reset, bang, bang, bang. Even if it's a 50-yard century, I'm not going to punt it in the box. Nonetheless, those 5-6 seconds, say even if Neymar bounces up straight away, which he probably won't because he's taken quite a few kicks, they've still had a few seconds to get their guys back, saying, yo, get back here, let's reorganise, let's restructure, let's do all of this, and it all works out fine. And especially when they take longer, because Neymar needs to get treatment. You get rest, 5-10 minutes. That's long. 2-3 minutes. You give them a nice little break, mentally, especially. Whereas, say if the guy moves on quicker, keep circulating the ball, get the ball back, extra touch, now he can move the ball along, keep moving, ticking it along, almost being a... What's the word? Can't think of the word, it's going to annoy me. Metronome, that's the word. A guy who continuously moves along the ball as the attacker, while also having the constant quality to either score or assist at any time you want. That is a problem which Neymar has. So those are the 3 main issues that I would say plagues him, even just as a footballer. Forget even as someone who can't stay healthy. Those are the issues that he has as a player. So now to the next thing. I didn't need the sheet for any of that. Back to the sheet, because I need to make sure that I say somewhat structured with this. Oh no, there's another thing I should cover. His fit with teammates. Particularly at his best. So, Neymar's fit with teammates, it's not perfect. No one's fit's perfect. Unless you're a totally off-ball. Like, the only players who are perfect fits are guys who can play back to goal, are guys who can press. No, forget the press. That's the thing I was thinking about. No, that's the thing I was thinking about on my brain earlier, because someone I follow mentioned about gimmicks that sports Twitter has. But So you want a guy who can play back to goal, a guy who can run in behind, a guy who can play with the ball and without the ball, a guy who can both control attacks and not control attacks. But basically, a player that doesn't exist is a player that's a perfect fit with everyone. So Neymar fits with most players. Because ultimately, the amount of guys that absolutely need the ball who you're going to fit with Neymar. So the only real ones that aren't necessarily going to fit with Neymar are guys who also need to dominate the ball. So say Messi. He's not going to fit with Neymar in a natural sense. Right, we saw the second time around at PSG, it just didn't work. Even at MSN, it didn't really work. One of them had to become the guy who was chilling higher up the pitch and executing those final actions. Ultimately, they worked. Ultimately, they functioned as a whole sometimes, but it was never perfect. But ultimately, you take a back-to-goal 9, Suarez. Suarez wasn't really back-to-goal 9, but he did at times. You take a Suarez, you take a Cavani, you take... Who else do you remember? He even fit with Fred, for Christ's sake, for Brazil. There are several guys. There are several different types of striker. Icardi, he fit with Icardi. Icardi's a poacher. Cavani is a guy who runs the channels and can do it all and will do the dirty work for him. Suarez is a guy who can do everything and is a primary creator, if in his own right, if he wants to be. He can do it as well. So he fits with him. He fits with Icardi. He fits with... So basically, Neymar fits with anyone and everyone. He fits with the poacher, he fits with the guy who does it all, he fits with the guy who can also create with him, things like that. But again, Suarez isn't bored on that. That's why the whole primary creator thing didn't necessarily cause any friction between him and Neymar. I'm going to try and milk this over the next half hour because my throat's very dry. This isn't great. So, strikers he can always fit with. Balancer types he can also fit with. So, Di Maria, a guy who can go in behind, come short, be another creator alongside him, be a secondary guy with him. He also works with him. He fits with guys who run in behind and are destructive forces in the final third. Look at Mbappe. Fits with him absolutely wonderfully. That's his most perfect partner ever. People talk about Messi because they had some 1-2s. In terms of a game-to-game basis, that is probably the best duo ever. Like, they're absolutely ridiculous in terms of the amount of solutions they had together, the way that they bounced 1-2s off each other, the ways that they understood each other's movements off the pitch. Here, you know what the strongest case for these two being the best duo ever is? They hated each other in their final season at PSG together. In 22-23, they despised each other. There were so many reports which came out that they hated each other. There were so many little pieces of information. On the pitch, they were fighting constantly over penalties and things like that. It seems like they hated each other, but the duo was still perfect. They would find each other constantly on such a regular basis. It didn't even matter that they hated each other. They were just the best duo around. So in terms of his fit with others, he was perfect. In terms of anyone that isn't also needing to dominate the ball, he's also fine. Like, he's brilliant. Like, he's a borderline perfect engine that you can have. Like I said, he had a few problems, but those are smaller things that ultimately prevent him from being in the absolute best ever discussions. But then we also need to discuss how he fits within the wider context of a team. So because of his habits, such as dropping extremely deep, those can cause some issues, right? Sometimes he steps on the toes of... Because I was more just talking about the up-front guys. He can sometimes step on the toes of midfielders. Sometimes even him dropping too deep can leave a bit of a disconnect between the midfield and the attack. Because the defence and the midfield tend to naturally end up having a natural codependence on each other. Especially with PSG, you had Verratti who can drop deep and be that connection. Neymar sometimes dropping a little bit too deep, especially when Verratti was gone, which sometimes caused some issues. He should have been, when PSG had the ball, the furthest he should go is like 50 yards from goal. Be it about 50, 60 yards from goal. Be it at most in your own centre circle. That is the absolute furthest he should go. Too often, he was receiving the ball off the centre-backs and receiving the ball on far too deep, and ultimately limited his influence. And then, like I said, sometimes he holds the ball a bit too much. Sometimes he didn't trust his teammates enough. And those are just the issues. But at the same time, with him as the engine, your floor as an attack was something extremely beautiful. You had guys who could just function off him as the sun, him as the primary scorer, creator, and progressor. It was an absolutely ridiculous thing that you were in line to see. But yeah, him as a team, him as an individual, he was one of the best engines that you will ever see. And then it brings us on to the final leg of this. We're already over an hour. I told you it was going to be long. So, is he over or underrated? It's a bit of both, which probably not the answer you're looking for, but the answer you're going to get. So, he's slightly overrated by the younger guys, and I say slightly, he's quite very much. So, He is viewed in the absolute top table, but ultimately he wasn't quite there because ultimately some of those guys were just perfect, right? Messi, Maradona, you can argue was in Ronaldo. I do, but we'll stick to Messi and Maradona for now. Those guys didn't have flaws. Maradona, you can say, didn't score enough, but he had enough scoring threat, and he always scored in the biggest games. So, is he flawed? Really? No. Neymar couldn't even continue his scoring in the biggest game when he took over as a central protagonist of a team. His scoring in the biggest games was heavily dependent upon Messi's presence. The only time which he scored against the absolute biggest teams were in the group stage of the Champions League. Now, albeit Liverpool, his away, so the home game at the Park where they played Liverpool, and it was an absolute must-win, otherwise they would bounce to the Champions League. Absolutely wonderful. That is one of the best performances that he had in his career because it was against the best team in the world, which for my money Liverpool were that season, and I think for a lot of people actually, a team with a bulletproof press, and he was conducting the attack, and he was dog-walking every single person on the pitch. Him and Verratti were the absolute clear-cut best players on the pitch, and it showed, especially in the first half with Neymar. He scored, his goal threat was there, he was creating, he was absolutely wonderful throughout the entire sequence that we've ever seen. But ultimately, he didn't score enough in those big games. So the perfect players, Messi and Maradona, they didn't have those issues. So again, you need to absolutely drop them at least below that. And even then, Ronaldinho scored in the big games. Henry did. Brazilian Ronaldo did. Cristiano does and did, even when he was more of a overall player as opposed to a poacher that he was later in his career. So, there is some flaws there, but what can you get? So, you also end up, but then at the same time, and then, so what am I saying? See, I've not talked this on for so long. Like even the live we did the other day, I didn't have to talk that much, really. A lot of it was just the guys riffing off each other. But then his skill set's jaw-dropping, right? Like, what he can do with the football is absolutely ridiculous. So I get why the younger generation somewhat overrate him, right? But at the same time, the absolute, total, unequivocal refusal to acknowledge the flaws which he has as a player, like I've said over here, the over-dribbling, the lack of endurance, the lack of consistent finishing, the lack of consistent ball striking, it's something which is, and again, some of that you can maybe put down to the fact that his feet were broken over and over, but nonetheless, it is something which you have to take into account. Holds the ball for too long, right? It's just things which, they're not minor things, they are serious things that inhibit you as a player. Because when you're comparing to perfection, these guys didn't have flaws. So, that's the whole idea of perfection. And again, right, like, it's just a general frustrating thing. But at the same time, the guys who underrate him, it's also frustrating because of the fact that there is a total refusal to acknowledge the guy who is a top 2 to 3 playmaker at worst ever. I think he's second behind Maradona. I think I would take him as the primary playmaking engine as a side over Messi. I really would. Even though it's clear his IQ is worse than Messi, his decision making is worse than Messi's. So does Maradona's, and I still take him. So, I think variance and ingenuity has something to do with it, and the ability to fit with more pieces, I think, has also somewhat of an effect. But yeah, the career achievement guys, so the career merchants, if you will, they do underrate him, but I do get it. Like, ultimately, the kids overrate him to a very, very large degree, right? Because of the fact that he is a beautiful player, and you find it hard to believe that there could have been better players than him outside of Messi, right? You don't think Ronaldinho or Brazilian Ronaldo or even Cristiano Ronaldo has any case over him. You don't think that. You don't think that Thierry Henry had any case over him. You don't think a lot of these guys had any cases over him for one reason or the other. You add in the fact that he didn't win anything serious as the absolute best player. World Cups, Copa Americas. He didn't win that. He didn't win those as the clear-cut best players. It's sort of hard. Like, objectively, those guys are probably more, like, resume-wise right. Because winning matters, and they also act as if all games weigh the same. They act as if your home debut against Toulouse matters the same as the game to decide the title. They act as if The home game against Bayern Munich in 17-18, where he dropped an absolute 10 out of 10 and it was absolutely beautiful. Did miss a clear cut 1-on-1. But he was absolutely wonderful. He was so good. And it's a group stage game. They act as if that weighs the same as a knockout game against Real Madrid. You can't have it like that. It's simply, it's a logic fail. The bigger the game, the more things matter. There's a reason why that people talk about Neymar's clinic against Atalanta, even though he missed all those chances in 1920, more than the clinic he put on against Galatasaray in that same season. Why? Because of the fact that one game, even though it was better, flatly, in terms of performance levels against Galatasaray, that was better. He scored, he assisted, he created, he conducted, he did absolutely everything we want to an absolute top 10, number 10. He was also against a better team in Atalanta, and it was a game that mattered, and it was a game that was win or go home. Those games matter more. They just do. I'm sorry. You can't apply the same way to each and every single game. It's impossible. So, yeah, also, like, you have, like, winning matters. But I do side with the overrated guys. But I do side with the guys who are overrated more. Like, the way that he plays, the way that he thinks the game, the way that he sees things ahead of time a lot of the time, the way that engines in general are king in the sport, and Neymar is one of the best engines that we have ever seen. It's hard for me to go too hard on the side that he's overrated. I agree slightly that he is a bit overrated by these people, but when you factor in the technical ability, the skill level, the fact that he is one of the best engines of all time, the fact that in rhythm he is a fantastic finisher, I can somewhat overlook some of the flaws he has, both in terms of as a skill set and in terms of performance. And even up here, the refusal to somewhat alter his game to ensure that he gets injured less, I can overlook those to a certain degree to have him more on the underrated side than the overrated side that some of the older heads like to call him. So yeah, that's how I have him. So, you know, the amount he has in the toolkit, he may have more than any guy ever, just through pure levels of performance. But Jesus Christ, he is frustrating at times. But even then, because you have to make the comparisons with the best players ever, with the best Brazilians, with the best South American players, with the best European players. Those guys ultimately won and they played well in their wins. Zidane in the final, 98 especially, dropped a clinic. Brazilian Ronaldo, final 0-2, dropped a clinic. Ronaldinho against Arsenal, very, very good. Cristiano, 2008 against Chelsea, even with the missed penalty, is very, very good. 2014 in the Champions League final, awful, fine. I had to get that in there. But in the semis on the way there, he was absolutely brilliant. Quarterfinals on the way there, he's absolutely fantastic. 17, pick you one. 2015 and 2011 Messi. You can pick Maradona in 86 all the way through. His worst game might have been the final, you can argue that, of that knockout run. But ultimately, what he did in the quarters and what he did in the semi-finals, two perfect performances. And then you have, who have I not mentioned so far? I've mentioned pretty much everyone you want me to mention. Maybe Henry. He's probably, like I said, and even then, in the 2000 European Championships final, he was probably the best player for France in that individual game. It was him or Zidane in that one. So, you know, even Kylian Mbappe, he was the best offensive player for France in the 2018 World Cup final. Like, anti-him in it too. But yeah, like the best players, and even Romario, he had a very good World Cup on the way to the winning. Being the best player on a team while winning is extremely important. Like, it just is, and no amount of revisionism and trying to make it a full team game will ever erase that fact. Especially when these same people are just doing it to avoid criticism on their player. Because they try and act like him winning the Confederations Cup weighs the same as these Champions Leagues and these World Cups and these European Championships, when they simply don't. So, yeah. He's brilliant, he just is a bit of a disappointment. Now, what else was I going to say? Do I want to mention the trustworthy thing? No, because that can easily be misconstrued as off-ball biases. So, do I want to say where I rank him? I have him in tier 2, basically. So I have tier 1 and then tier 1.5 and then tier 2. Like, tier 1 is Messi, Maradona, Brazilian Ronaldo. Tier 2, tier 1.5, I have Zidane. He's just an absolute alien. Then tier 2, I have a mix of guys. There's like 6 guys in tier 2. Neymar, Mbappe, Yamal, Cristiano, Henry, Ronaldinho, maybe, I think that's all 6. My list's on my phone. Yeah, I'm worn out from this now. I've done this. Like I said, I need to build up the tolerance again. But yeah, like some of the discourse. The other thing that irritates me is that some of the discourse does just rely too much on what he could have been, as opposed to what he eventually ended up becoming. Because ultimately, we saw what he could have become, even in those seasons where he got injured. But ultimately, the games have to matter. The outcomes have to matter. You can't just base it off of, potential and acting as if those games would automatically scale up. Because ultimately, he did play badly in some of these big games, and that can't just be overlooked. And if you don't play, you don't get credit for those games either, which is the other irritating thing. So yeah. Neymar's an enigma. I don't think he'll ever have a settled place in football history. He'll always be remembered as a wonderful player. One of the absolute best ever. He's just an absolute wizard. And for that reason, he'll always inspire more people than people hate him. And I think as people get older, they'll learn to appreciate Neymar more. But then, I don't know, because Yamal's on the scene now. And Yamal's brought back some of the absolute wizardry that people associated with Neymar. If any of you have seen the angles of Yamal flipped, you'll know what I'm talking about. He looks like Neymar as a winger. Because it's got Yamal as a right footer on the left wing. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, with all that said, will Neymar even be remembered like that? I'm not sure. Because Ronaldinho won, that's what he's remembered. He's not remembered strictly because of the skills, but he's not remembered strictly because of the things he won. He's remembered because of both. Neymar doesn't have both. Not as the best player. There's a reason why his Barcelona days are more fondly remembered, even though he was significantly better at PSG. So it's an interesting one. We'll have to see how it works out. So the other thing we have to factor in is that the player and the career are always different, which is the thing I always try and bring nuance to. Because ultimately, Neymar's career is a disappointment. Right? I don't think there's any way that someone can argue otherwise, right? He was meant to be the guy to take the mantle from Messi and Cristiano. Especially Cristiano, who was meant to become Messi's rival. Because, say, when Messi's 30, Ronaldo's 32, and, Messi's game was always going to the assumption it would age better because it's more technique-based. Neymar would be 25 by this point. So now he's perfectly in line to have one of the best careers ever. He's in line to challenge for the title of GOAT. He's in line to challenge anyone and everyone. Ultimately, he didn't. He was in line to become one of the absolute best ever. He was in line to become the next great Brazilian. In that long line, you have Pelé. Then you had Garrincha in there too. You had a little gap where I'm not quite sure where everyone fits in, but then you have Zico in the 80s. Then you have Romario. Then you have Ronaldo. Then you have Rivaldo. Then you have Ronaldinho, and you have Kaká. And even then, Kaká's lower than the rest of those guys. Kaká and Rivaldo are lower in the line than the rest of those guys. And after Ronaldinho, it was meant to be Neymar. And he failed, ultimately. So his career is a disappointment no matter which way you slice, because he's meant to be an unequivocal top 5 greatest player of all time. And he's not even a clear-cut top 5 player in terms of peak performance levels of all time. So he is a disappointment. But at the same time, as a player, he brought such ridiculous levels. So it's hard to evaluate truly. So yeah, I don't think anyone sums up the player and the career are two separate things better than Neymar. Because player-wise, you can argue him as high as probably top 4. Maybe 3 if you really want to. No, top 4 or 5 if you really want to. But as a career-wise, he's a massive disappointment. There's loads of guys who've had better careers than him. Mbappe's got a better career than him. Cristiano's obviously way up here, and a lot of people don't view them in the same stratosphere of footballers, which is interesting. Yamal to this point might have a better career. Honestly, Yamal's won a European Championship. He's won a league as the clear-cut best player in Spain. It's a debate to be had. If you really want to. Henry has arguably a better career. Ronaldinho has a better career. A lot of these guys. Let's even just take the guys in that tier 2. Neymar has the worst career. Mbappe has a World Cup. Say what you want, he has a World Cup. Because obviously, I'm guessing that's the thing that a lot of people take issue with. Yamal's got a European Championship, and he's also got a league title. I think he has 2 winners' medals because of 23, but that doesn't count. Not like my mental stat book, but still, So you can see Thomas Muller's had a better career. That's a big one. That one goes viral. Robin might have a better career. He's won a Champions League as the best player. But no one thinks he's better than Neymar. Mo Salah probably had a better career. Sadio Mane had a better career. Haaland might have a better career. He won a treble as the best player. You can really argue. Maybe De Bruyne's had a better career. I don't know. There's a lot of guys you can make a case for having a better career than Neymar. But they're not better players. So yeah, the player and the career is always different. And no player sums him up better than Neymar. He's an enigma. I think he'll remain that way for the rest of his life. Well, for the rest of football discourse. Until video dies out. Until the asteroid comes and all our internet goes. Until we get cyber attacked. All the internet goes and all the footage dies. Then it just goes back to word of mouth. Then we just have to believe on like Beacon or whatever. Like Joseph Bacon or however you pronounce his name. They'll be back in the old days like that. Oh no, well, he's not real. And then it'll just be newspapers. People, I've seen people unironically try and judge players using newspapers, which is insane. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't think he'll ever have a settled place in football discourse, which is interesting and it's a shame. Like, if he wins a World Cup next year, somehow, I don't know how, but let's say if he does it, then things will change a little, and we'll maybe see the player more in line with the career, even though the career caught up with the player at a very, very different timeline. But nonetheless, we'll have to see. But yeah, he's a beautiful player, right? He is one of the most beautiful mechanical works that we've ever seen in sport. He doesn't have a settled view, which is actually quite funny. It might actually be quite fitting of him. But yeah, I know some of this video is very long. Like, I spent half the time recapping his career, and I spent the other half of this sort of trying to analyze the player and this and that and his fit with others and blah 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 and all that. It's a very long one, and I knew it would be long. Like this is not like normally. Like I can account for a page taking around like 10 minutes per. The pages actually accounted for a little bit less today because of the fact that some of it was just career stuff and I couldn't remember some off the top of my head, and then quite a bit of it ended up relying on the actual things of what I've seen from the player. So it's a bit of a mishmash, and it's it's one of, and it's a bit of a new thing. Like, obviously this is a new concept. Like I've not done one of these before, so yeah, I'm well aware that the video is probably not exactly in line with a normal, regular, structured, streamlined thing, or maybe it is. I don't know. That's probably up to you guys to decide. But yeah, this was fun. The player deep dive, 80-something minutes on Neymar. That is something. Well, I hope you all enjoyed. If you enjoyed this, let me know. Put it in the comments. Put it in the live chat when this premieres. Say that you want me to do more of these or not. And like I said, like, rate, subscribe. It helps a ton. And yeah, follow the pod on Spotify or whatever. I don't think this is going to go anywhere else. I don't know if I'll put this on Apple. I've not figured out how to do that part yet. But yeah, this has been a long one. This has been the longest solo one. Every other one I at least had someone else on, where it extended this long. But hey, this was fun. If you want more of these, just put it in the comments. Name the player you want me to do. Name this, name that. I'm best positioned to do players post 2000. I can cover Brazilian Ronaldo's pretty well. I can cover Maradona's pretty well, but not perfectly. But ideally, keep it to players post like 2000, just because they're a bit easier. Zidane, I can do pretty well, but especially try and keep it to newer players, but ideally make them a little bit older, right? Don't do I don't know, who's 28. Don't do Dembele, because he's 28, and this video depending on where I have him, will either age really well or really badly. So I don't quite. So be normal, be a bit older, or be a bit old. Maybe even projection stuff. I don't know. But yeah, regardless, I had a bunch of fun with this. Like I said, if you want more, just name the player and just try not to be unreasonable with it. Next week, I don't know what I'm going to cover. I'll figure that out. I normally figure these out just a day or two before in terms of what I'm going to cover. But hey, I will be doing more of the roundtables. I'm likely going to try and get one out in the next week or so again. Try and do that, because that was good fun as well. The topic will be Mbappe versus Yamal, because that one ended on a pretty upbeat note. Like we sort of had to stifle it because the rest of the guy, because everyone just sort of had to go basically. But nonetheless, that was fun. And hope you enjoyed this one. Yeah, I'm gassed, man. This is a long one. So if you've stuck to the end, thank you very much. I might do this as a poll on Spotify as well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. I'll speak to you all again soon. Bye-bye.